Welcome to the class. I hope that we are connected and thank you for attending. Thank you for connecting this morning. The plan is to continue with a free class and the structure is very similar compared to the previous days, and I hope you will enjoy the class. If today is your first day, thank you for connecting, and maybe some of you are familiar with the class already, so hopefully you will enjoy and you will benefit from the class. So the structure, as I said, will be very similar compared to the other days, and hopefully we have no problem with the connection, we have no problem with disruption, um, hopefully no little animals in the room, and hopefully we have no disruption from home as well. We have 6 people working from home, so hopefully everything is okay. So I think we are connected. Just let me check, because sometimes we have problems with the Wi-Fi. Perfect. So yeah, I hope you can understand me. I hope that if you have problems to understand me, you can use the subtitles. There are subtitles available on the Facebook page, and I recommend maybe you use the subtitles. The majority are correct, but there are some errors in relation to the subtitles, but maybe it's a good idea to use them. On the left, this is the plan for the week. So every morning we have a speaking session at 9 o'clock, and this morning we had the speaking session at 9 o'clock, and tomorrow the plan is to continue with a speaking group to practice conversation, to practice speaking about different topics, and also for correction and to add vocabulary. So that is the plan every morning at 9 o'clock. You are welcome to attend. It is open for everybody, people with different levels. So if you want to attend, just contact me and I can give you the details. But also there is a WhatsApp group you can join. The link for the WhatsApp group is on the Facebook page, and you are welcome to join if you want to practice some speaking in the morning. Okay. Also, we continue with the free class at 11:15, and the concentration of the class probably will be in the category of use of English, phrasal verbs, idioms, and I will explain now in 1 minute. That is the plan for today. So we had the speaking session, the free class. Also at 4 o'clock today, we have a specific webinar dedicated to the IELTS exam. So every day we have a specific webinar, which is a separate class, an extra class. It's open for anybody to attend, and the topic today is the IELTS exam, and we continue with exercises preparing people for the IELTS exam today at 4 o'clock. And if you want to participate, if you want to join, you can contact me and I will give you the details. And that is the plan for this week and the plan for today. So I'll show you here that the structure, as I said, we have an introduction. So at the beginning, I give the introduction document, which is very important just to refresh and to introduce you to the important concepts of grammar. Because during my class, I mention a lot of technical vocabulary, and for this reason, at the beginning of the class, it's necessary to explain the technical vocabulary. Okay, so that's the idea of the introduction document. After the introduction document, we continue the list of phrasal verbs, and they are very important. So we continue little by little to try to explain the phrasal verbs, and also the idioms is in. We have another list, the idiom list here. Okay. Then finally, if we have time, we can continue with an article in relation to influencers on Instagram. So the topic is very specific, and that's a possibility depending on time. Okay, so let me show you the introduction document. So first, I want to explain this document. For me, it's maybe the most important document. It is all the content of English. So we're learning English. It's very necessary that you are familiar with the terms at the beginning. So some of you, of course, are familiar with this document. Some of you are familiar with the terms already, but it's a good idea to refresh and just to warm up a little, because as I said in sport, before you play the match, before you have the activity, you have a small period to warm up, and that's the idea of this also. So for me, there are 3 sections. The first section is the use of English. The second section are different in English, okay, and the third section is just grammar topics in general. So we have more content here. So the first section for me probably is the most important, and this is the reason it is at the top of the list, because the use of English contains phrasal verbs, it contains idioms, and also different accents and different dialects around the world. So for me, this area is probably the most important when you are learning English. If you want to master English, I recommend you focus a lot on this topic, okay? Particularly phrasal verbs and idioms. We use phrasal verbs all the time with family, in informal situations, very serious situations. We use idioms and phrasal verbs all the time. So basically, the concept is a verb plus a preposition. It's possible literal significance, but it's also possible a second completely different significance. And this is the importance of the phrasal verbs, because they are very particular to English, they are very unique to English, and they cause and create a lot of problems and a lot of difficulties when you are learning English. So for this reason, I want to identify, I want to focus, and particularly concentrate on phrasal verbs and idioms. Okay. Conversation, yes, it's a big part of English. So you are practicing English, you're learning English, you want to improve. The best idea is to try to practice conversation. Ideally, you can find somebody who will correct your conversation, who will correct your speaking, and that's the biggest way to. Mornings at 9 o'clock, we have a specific class, as I explained, in relation to speaking sessions, and you are welcome to participate whenever you want in relation to the speaking classes. Okay. Pronunciation. So pronunciation in English, there are a lot of irregular pronunciations and a lot of words that we pronounce a little irregularly. So during the class, I try to identify and focus the key words that cause a lot of problems for pronunciation. Okay, so that's important. The tenses. So when you speak English, you need to be very aware. You need to understand very well the different times. Okay, do you speak in the present, the past, the future? And in English, we have a few terms and a few concepts in relation to tenses that I want to explain now at the beginning just a little. Okay, so first we have the simple. We have the present simple, the past simple, and the future simple. These are actions that are completed one time in the present, one time in the past, it's finished, and one time in the future. The difficulty is usually the past simple. We have a lot of irregular verbs, past simple. Yes, we have regular verbs, for example, ask, asked. To create a regular verb, it's just ed, asked. Report, reported. Talk, talk. So to create a regular verb in the past is very easy, it's just ed, but we have a lot of irregular verbs in the past simple. This is a big difficulty and a big challenge when you learn English. Okay, the next concept is the continuous. The present continuous, the past continuous, and the future continuous. The period of the activity happening continuously in the future, continuously in the present, continuously in the past. For example, I am speaking, I was speaking, I will be speaking. That's the idea, that's the concept of the simple and the continuous. The next idea is the perfect, which is very important. We use the perfect frequently in English. We use the present perfect and the past perfect, but also the future perfect. And the construction of the present perfect is the subject, the extra auxiliary verb to have, plus the participle of the verb. Participle is typically the third column in school. You learn the columns in school: go, went, gone, and gone is the third column. We use the third column in relation to the perfect, the construction of the perfect. So for example, I have eaten my breakfast is the same example every day. It's finished, it's completed, but its consequences are relevant to now and relevant to the present. So I have eaten my breakfast, it's finished, it's completed, but it's relevant to the present because at the moment I am not hungry. The difference between the present perfect and the past perfect, the past perfect is normally used before another action in the past simple, and the construction is very similar to the present perfect, except it's the past. I had eaten my breakfast before my friend contacted me. Okay, so that's the little difference between the present perfect and the past perfect. Yes, we have the possibility in the future perfect, I will have eaten my breakfast before my friend will contact me. So those three are probably the most frequent tenses and the most frequent concepts: the simple, continuous, and perfect. Okay, also we have the idea of the infinitive. So the infinitive is the base of the verb. It's the foundation, and typically it's with to go, to eat, to have, to drink, to meet. This is the infinitive, and during the class I mention frequently the concept of the infinitive. Okay, so that's the simple, continuous, perfect, and infinitive. Also, we have the conditional. So in the book, in the theory for the conditional, it's quite heavy. It's very, very time consuming. It's a little stressful to study the conditionals in the book because in theory we have the zero, first, second, third, and mixed conditionals, which are rules for combining the different times related to the sentence. But basically, in conversation, it's less strict and it really centers, focus on the word if. If it rains today, I will not go to the city centre. If I contacted my friend yesterday, I would have asked about my dog. Okay, so conditionals are a big part of English and they are very, very important. They're a little difficult to study, but hopefully during the class I try to identify some of the conditionals. Okay, the final important concept that's very impressive, that's very important, is the active and the passive. So this is a bit technical, but the active is typically the normal structure of a sentence. Subject, I, you, he, she, subject, verb, object. That's the typical structure, and we call this structure the active. And also in English, it's frequent to create the passive. So to create the passive, we change the position of the object and the subject. In the sentence, we introduce extra verb to be, and we also introduce the participle of the original verb. I'll give you one example. I walk the dog. Okay, so I walk the dog. That's the active, subject, verb, object. To create the passive, the dog was extra verb to be in the past because the original verb is the past. The dog was walked is the participle by me. That's just one example of the active and the passive, and it's very frequent, it's very common, it's very impressive, and it's very fluent. So it's a big part of English. The simple, continuous, perfect, infinitive, conditionals, and active and passive are the most important concepts in relation to the tenses. Okay. Furthermore, we have some terms in relation to grammar that are very important. For example, a noun. We have a noun, which is a person, a place, or a thing. We have an article. So every noun, you have an article. Okay, so house. You have a house or the house. There's two possibilities for the article, a house or the house. When the noun begins with a vowel, a, e, I, o, u, we use the article an, an apple, an orange. Okay, so you have the noun, the article, and the adjective. So the position of the adjective is very important. The adjective is before the noun, okay, because in other languages I think the position is after. So in English, the position is before the noun, and the function of the adjective is to describe the noun. House, big house. Article, the big house. That's a typical sentence. Article, adjective, noun. Very important structure, and you need to be clear. We also have the idea of countable and uncountable in relation to the noun. Is it possible to count the noun? One house, two houses, three houses? Yes, a house you can count. So in this situation, we say how many houses. But if it's not count, for example, water, chocolate, time, air, we say how much. That's important for how much and how many in relation to countable and uncountable. Okay. For adjectives, we also have the idea of superlative and a comparative. So I am happy. This person is happier than me, but this person is the happiest. So this is in the area of adjectives, and that area is named the comparative and the superlative, which is important. And you can see during the class more examples of this. Okay. Adverbs are also very important. So the function of the adverb is to describe the verb, and typically the position of the adverb is after the verb. So the verb to drink, to go, to talk, and the adverb typically is ly, to talk slowly, to run quickly. So that's the typical structure. The function of the adverb is to describe the verb, and the position of the adverb is typically at the end or after the verb. Okay. So adverbs are a big part of English. They're very important. The next section is modal verbs. So in English, we have a very particular group of verbs called modal verbs. You can see the list here. And can is typically used in situations for ability and permission. I can play the guitar. It's my ability. I can run a marathon. It's my ability. But also permission. I can enter the room. It's my permission. So for permission and ability, it's typically can, the verb. Okay? The other three verbs, could, may, and might, are very, very similar. We use could, may, and might in situations of possibility and options. I could go to the cinema. I may go to the cinema. I might go to the cinema. Options, 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 and a possibility. And they are very, very similar. Possibly may and might are a little more polite and a little more formal. So those three are very important modal verbs as well. The next one is shall, which is typical in a question. It's probably formal. It's probably polite. So shall we go to the park? We contact your friend. It's very polite, very formal. The significance is a question. Will we go to the park? Will we contact your friend? The word shall is frequent. It's important to be aware of it, and it is very, very common. Similarly, in situations for advice and recommendation, we specifically use the verb should. So my advice to you, you should clean this room. You should contact your friend. It's my advice and my recommendation. The significance of the next verb is exactly the same. The pronunciation is a little difficult because the G is silent, but the significance is the same. You ought to contact your friend. You ought to read this book. It's my recommendation and my advice. You should contact your friend. You should read the book. Exactly the same. Maybe ought to is a little more formal. And finally, must is obligation. You have no choice. You must collect the children. You must do the exercise. You must meet your friend. It's obligation. You have no choice. And the second possibility is the verb have to. You have to contact your friend. They are the most typical phrasal verbs. The big rule in relation to phrasal verbs is the position. So the phrasal verb is before the next verb, and typically the next verb we eliminate to. So you must go, you can have, you might speak, because that's correct, correct, correct. The error, which is incorrect, is typical might to go, can to go. That's incorrect because it's necessary to eliminate to. Okay, just important, and that's the biggest. Prepositions, I think most of you are familiar with prepositions. So prepositions are related to movement, to direction, and to position. But we have maybe 150 prepositions. And for direction, I speak to you. I look at the wall. Okay, and movement again. So travel, I run across the road. So for movement, direction, and position, my cat is in my hand. My cat is over my hand, under, beside, below. We have a lot of prepositions and they're very important, but also in relation to phrasal verbs. Prepositions are a big part of phrasal verbs. It's a combination of a verb and a preposition in the phrasal verb, which creates a different significance. And usually the phrasal verb and the preposition is associated with emotion. So up is happy, positive creation. Down is negative, destruction, and maybe depression. So there is a significance with emotion associated with the prepositions. Okay, the next area is important. So we have three technical names. We have the possessive adjective, the possessive pronoun, and the object pronoun. They're the technical terms. But basically the difference between my cat, your cat, his cat, her cat, or the cat is mine, the cat is yours, the cat is his, the cat is hers, or give the cat to me, give the cat to you, give the cat to him, or give the cat to her. Those three categories are typically confused when people speak English, when people learn English. So my advice, my tip is that you're very, very clear, particularly with this area. Also, the significance of this, that, these, and those is very important. And sometimes people confuse them, but you need to be very, very clear. This is singular here, that is singular in a different position. These is plural, and those is plural, depending on the position. Also, the difference between another, other, the other, and the others. There's four possibilities. They have different uses, and during the class, I try to identify. Basically, another is for singular, another day, another week, another year. Other is typically for plural, other days, other weeks, other years. So it is important, and you need to be very, very clear with this also. Questions, how to create a question is a big part of English, and it's a big topic. You probably, of course, need to prepare and need to study the area of creating questions and hopefully I can help during the classes and also during specific webinars for grammar on Mondays. I can help maybe with the creation and the construction of the questions. Finally, suffixes and prefixes are a big part of English, and I really recommend that you are very familiar with the concept of a suffix and the concept of a prefix. The suffix in particular really helps to identify the form of the word. Is the word a verb? Is it adjective? Is it noun? The prefix and the suffix definitely indicate a lot if the word is a noun, a verb, an adjective, an adverb. So for me, suffixes are a big help and a big tip and a big recommendation when you learn English. They really, really help a lot, suffixes and prefixes. Linkers, we have some very simple linkers, we have some very basic linkers, but also we have some more advanced and proficient linkers, and of course they need to be used appropriately, and we have a lot. And here you can see the basic ones: and, but, or, nor, but also we have more advanced, although, because, well as that, as long as, in order to, we have some more advanced linkers, and it's important you are aware of the separation between basic and more advanced linkers. Okay, that's it. So those expressions, those terms are probably the key expressions, the key terms, the key vocabulary when you learn English. They are the technical terms, and they are very, very important, especially in my class, because during the class I mention frequently the specific vocabulary. So for this reason, it's necessary to understand. But independent of this, it's necessary that you are aware of the terms, because when you learn English, it's very important that you are familiar with the structures. Okay, writing is important as well. So yes, there are 5 categories that you have to learn that are very, very typical. Reading is very important. You need to read magazines, books, newspapers. You need to read a lot for vocabulary and for structures. Grammar, you need to study a grammar book. Online, there are 2 or 3 brilliant grammar pages. For example, the British Council, Cambridge have 2 brilliant websites for grammar. Reading, grammar, listening is important. You need to listen to radio, movies, but more importantly, you probably need to listen to other people and interact with people from different parts of the world. Speaking is very important, and also writing is important. So they are the 5 areas that are very, very key. Also, exam preparation is very important. The Cambridge exams are very popular. The first certificate, advanced certificate, proficiency certificate, and also the IELTS exams are very, very popular. And we have specific webinars dedicated to exams. For example, today at 4 o'clock, we have a specific webinar on Zoom, open to anybody, to look at some questions of the IELTS exam. Okay, good. So that is the structure of the introduction of the grammar. Now, probably, I want to show you the list of idioms and also the list of phrasal verbs. For me, the phrasal verbs are a little more difficult, so I think we will begin with the phrasal verbs, because the idioms are a bit more entertaining and a bit easier, but I think it's a good opportunity and a good idea to practice the list of the phrasal verbs. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen, and yesterday I the children are very quiet, everybody is asleep. But the other word which sounds similar but is completely different, quite. And quite is like bastante. We use it in English before the adjective: quite happy, quite tired, quite hungry, like bastante feliz. So quite is very, very important. Also, we can say pretty, and we can say rather. 3 words which kind of combine with the adjective: quite happy, pretty happy, rather happy. Very, very similar. Probably the last 2 more formal, but quite is more general. So that's really, really important. But the pronunciation of the first word is quiet, which has the significance of very calm, very peaceful. but it is possible a verb to quiet, and maybe in relation to your head, if you're thinking, you're stressed, and you're overthinking, situation. But yes, here is a phrasal verb, so a typical preposition that we combine with quiet, and we say to quiet down, which is a typical instruction, a typical order, typically for children in the school, to quiet down, which is very similar to calm down. So the significance of the preposition is important because the noise is typically up, the volume is typically high. So if you want to quiet down, that means to reduce the volume. Okay? Typical, not really super common, but it is important to be aware. And here's the example. The neighbors told us to quiet down last night or they would call the police. Okay, complicated sentence because we have the example of the conditional. So the instruction is to be quiet, and if you are, they would hypothetically in the conditional call the police. So we have an example here of the conditional. Also, we have an example between British English and American English. So I think in the United States, they say neighbors with OU, but in the United Kingdom, sometimes I confuse, but I think I'm correct that in the United Kingdom it is OU, and in the United States it's neighbor. Okay, so there is a difference in the United States and the United Kingdom sometimes in relation to vocabulary and spelling, and sometimes it's not so important because today with the internet, with the movies, with series, with the media, we're very familiar with the two possibilities. So it's not a big problem sometimes, and that's just one example. The difference between tell and say. Okay, so tell, why not? So the question, why not? The neighbors told to us. So the question is, normally we say to, and we just say to my friend, I say to you, but tell is just more direct. We do not need the preposition because the understanding, it's implicit in the word tell is correct. So that's just important, the difference between say to and tell. Okay, now the next verb is to read. So this verb is important because it's irregular in pronunciation. The verb to read, I read my book, I read my magazine, okay? Read another person. So it's not necessarily a book. You can read another person, which is maybe to read the language, okay? So you can read body language. You can read the mind. So the pronunciation is very important as well. I read your mind, or you read my mind. You can predict what I am thinking. So it is flexible, the verb to read. I think in all languages it's the same, but in English the pronunciation is difficult because the past is I read. The spelling is exactly the same as the present. I read, but I read, and the participle is read as well. So of course it has the same significance as the color. So sorry, the same pronunciation, the same sound as the color. So I read in the present, read in the past, and I have read for the perfect. Okay, so that's the reason it's curious. But in relation to phrasal verbs and combinations, there is a typical phrasal verb with the verb to read, and the significance is, the construction is the verb to read plus the preposition up. Okay, and it is very common, very typical. So for example, I know nothing about Japanese language. I know nothing about Korean language. So it's necessary for me to read about the language. But in this situation, we say to read up. So I need to read up, and typically on. So we have two prepositions: read up on the Japanese language or read up on Korean. And the significance is maybe to study, to research. It's very typical. So a synonym would maybe be to research, to study. So I am preparing for a job interview. I want to start a new company, for example, and I want to start with the new job, with the new company. So before my interview, I need to study the company, I need to study the market, I need to research the market, so I need to read up on the topic, I need to read up on the company. So really, really simple, really frequent, but maybe tricky with the prepositions. And here's the example. Okay, so to research, as I said, is like to study for a topic for a reason. So I need up on the so the example is exactly the same as mine, exactly the same. So I need to read up on the company, I need to research, I need to study before I go for the job interview. Okay. Other prepositions combined with read, not really. You can say maybe to read out, which is more literal. So for example, I have my book, I have a lot of books here, and I think you saw my haircut, which is a disaster from the lockdown. So to read out could be very, very literal. So because the words are in the book and read out, but we say to read out loud is very, very typical. Okay, so to read out loud, that means in alta voz altura or voz alto. So to read out loud is what we say in English. So loud is the adjective, and that means you read for everybody. Okay. For example, read back doesn't exist. Read under, no. Read in, no. Read, no. So they're the most typical combinations with the verb to read and the prepositions. They're the most common phrasal verbs. Okay. And as I said, the other contexts: read your mind, read somebody's sense feelings, to read the mood. Okay, so they're the mood, as I said, to read the mood. And in sport, in football, the player can read the match, read the game. It's like predict the game. So it's really good ability and a good talent as well. The next verb is to ring. Okay, we have two verbs. The first verb is to ring, and the second verb is exactly the same pronunciation, but the significance is different. Okay, so let me explain a little better. So we have a ring, which I think is anillo. So this is my ring, for example. This is what we say a ring because it's probably this circular. So the verb to ring is typical for action. Okay, because you remember the old telephone, when you use telephone, it was necessary to do this 8, 7, 6. So you need to ring your finger, and that's the reason we say today, I need to ring my friend. So we continue to say ring, but now today we press the button, but before we ring the telephone. And that's obviously the most common situation with the telephone. You can also say to call, no problem. Phone, maybe informal, you can say to buzz your friend, which is definitely informal, but the significance is like in English we have a word onomatopoeia, when the word sounds like the, so buzz is like vibration. So to buzz your friend is to call your friend. The phone will vibrate, okay, and it will make the sound of a buzz. So that's the situation, the explanation of the verb to ring, number one. The second verb has the same pronunciation, to ring, but the context and the significance is completely different. So it's related to material and it's related to cloth. So if my jacket or my cloth is very, very wet and I need to wring the cloth, I need to wring the jacket. So I need to remove the water from the cloth, and that's the action, that's the verb to wring. And it's very typical to say as well, wringing wet. So if a person is wringing wet, that means they are extremely wet. They are really, really wet because the clothes, and you can also say soaking wet. And you can also say drenched. So there's specific vocabulary for the verb to wring. But as I said, the previous verb is a bit different, and just important vocabulary just to remember. Okay. So in relation to combinations with the verb to ring and also the prepositions, you can say to ring up, and that's the only really possibility, to ring up, and that means to contact somebody. So if you ring your friend up, that means you contact your friend or you call your friend. So it's exactly the same significance as maybe just to ring. To ring your friend and to ring your friend up are exactly the same. There's no real significance. Maybe up is like awake and alert, because when you contact your friend by the maybe, so just be careful. But they are the most typical situations to ring. Okay, and here's the example: ring up. So Jack rung, so it is irregular. To ring, rang, and rung, and that's probably the most important aspect of the verb. So the verb to ring, I rang, and rung is the participle we use in the perfect. So Jack rung me up, which maybe in the United States is different because I think rang is the past simple. So that means contacted me, phoned me last night at 3 in the morning. Okay, so not too difficult. The next one is rule. And after rule, we continue to run. And really, run is very important because yesterday I think we saw put, and put we have a lot of verbs with put, but with run it's practically the same with importance. We have a lot of combinations, a lot of vocabulary in relation to run. And before we begin with run, let's look at the verb to rule. Okay, so the verb is to rule, which is typical for the president, typical for the prime minister, typical for the government, for the emperor. So the action is to rule, rule the people, rule the world. Okay, to rule the people. Bag, but you have a ruler, and a ruler is the object, like it's maybe wood, Madeira, it's wood object, or maybe it's metal, or maybe it's plastic, and this is a ruler, which is the object you draw the straight line. So a ruler could be a person, or it could be an object for school. Okay, and out. So you have to eliminate, or you have to cancel your idea because you cannot continue. So to rule out is to say no, and it's typical when you make a decision. So you have two options. Do you want to go to Italy for your holiday? Do you want to go to Egypt? Or do you want to go to Ireland? So the weather in Ireland is very bad, and I want some warm weather for my holiday. So I am ruling Ireland out. So in your decision, when you choose not to select one place or one thing, you can rule out. It's very, very typical, very common. The example here, really good. So I would not, in the hypothetical situation, I would not rule out the possibility of moving to another. So remember, another is for singular, another country, if. So it's a conditional. If I obtain, if I get a good job offer. So in the hypothetical, if I get a job offer, the negative, I would not rule out the opportunity to move. Perfect example, a little advanced, really, really typical. So to rule out, okay? And they are probably the most typical expressions with to rule. Now we begin with the magnificent verb to run. So obviously to run is typical physically. In school, in sport, in athletics, you run. That's number one. If you're late for the bus, you're running for the bus. If you're going to a meeting and you're late for the meeting, it's a bit more metaphorical. So you're running late is physically running, you're in the car, but you're moving late. Okay, so to run, number one is physical, like athletics. Two is maybe just moving in the procedure, in the process. For example, the movie you need to be clear the difference between the verb to bathe and a bath. Bañar, I think in Espanol. So the verb is to bathe, the pronunciation is difficult, and the bath is the noun. Okay, and it's very similar to breathe, the pronunciation is important, and the noun a breath. So for these two, for me, they're the most typical expressions, sorry, the most typical pronunciations in this family of words. So bathe is the verb, and we can also say to sunbathe, okay? And the bath is the noun, so the pronunciation is completely different. But in English, in relation to the verb to run, it is possible to run, and the significance is you open the tap is the grifo, you open the tap and you are running the business, you are managing the business, you are directing the business, you are running the business. So it's very typical to run a business or to run a company. And that has the significance that you are managing, you are directing, you are in control, you are responsible. Okay. And that's the most important significance on context of the verb to run. Now we combine prepositions to make phrasal verbs. Okay, and the first one I think is to run up a bill. So this is typical for electricity, for a bill. So you have a bill from electricity, you have a bill from the gas, you have a bill from the restaurant. So to run up a bill, you can imagine, is movement. Run is movement and up is high. So high movement of the bill, it's very understandable. So you go to the restaurant and you decide at the start you only want a little. But when you were in the restaurant, you eat more, and your friend comes, and another friend comes, and the bill. So you run up a big bill, and the significance is you have to pay a big bill. That's very, very typical. With run up, you can say to run in. Well, we normally say to have a run in is the noun. Okay, so to have a run in, they have a run in is like a disagreement or a conflict. So to have a run in is to have a fight, have an argument, to have a discussion with another person. So that's very, very typical, very common with friends, very, very typical. So you can say this person had a run in with the other person, and it means a disagreement, a discussion, or a fight. Okay, so that's run up and run in. The next one that's very, very typical is to run out of. And this is really, really common. So in relation to a quantity of products, for example, in the house, you have milk, you have sugar. And if you run, it's like movement. And the significance run out of, you have no more. So if you run out of milk, you run out of sugar, the significance is you have no more because you have used all the content and you have used all the food. Very typical for food, very typical for time, very typical for money, very typical for energy. Okay, so you can say run out of money, run out of food, run out of energy, and run out of time. Also, you can say patience. So it's very similar to lose patience, but it is really, really typical and very, very difficult to understand, but it is really, really common. And that's, you will see the example now in a minute. So run up, run in, run out of, run around is possible as well. So run around is maybe literal and typical with children. So with the pandemic, the children, it's necessary to stay in the house, which is very difficult because the children want to go outside and the children want to run around. Okay, it could be just in circles, but it's just a metaphor for fun or to play. So to run around is to play. It is typical in the noun. If you have a runaround, it's like a car. So in a family, you maybe want a little car because you need a car to go to the supermarket, you need a car to go to the doctor. do the little jobs. It's also possible a person. So if this person is a runaround, it's maybe the first person, the last person who enters the company, the youngest person who enters the company, and their obligation is to get milk, to get tea, to make coffee, the little jobs. So the person is a runaround, a little negative, a little insult. In this situation, you can also say to give someone the runaround is this context. So the company, the manager gives the new employee the runaround. And that means the manager gives the new employee all the little jobs. Okay. In relation to run, you can say to run rings around someone. This is very, very common and very, very typical. And again, we had run and we had ring. So the ring is this. So if you run rings around me, so that means you are much better than me. You are more talented. So if there's a competition and one person runs rings around the other person, the significance is this person is much better. Okay, it's really typical in conversation, really normal. And if somebody runs rings around the other person, they dominate, they are much better, they are much more talented. So they're much better. They run rings around somebody. Typically in football, again, the footballer can run rings around the defender. There's a lot of expressions in relation to run. So that's run up a bill. Run in is to have an argument, to have a run in. To run out of is to lose the quantity of money, to lose. I think we're still live. That's good. Okay. And that's run around. Run back is literal. So you go to the city and you run back, no problem. Here we see a few more. Okay. So run across, they say to find unexpectedly. Not really, because normally we say to come across. To come across is to find unexpectedly from me. Okay, so if you clean your room and the room is very dirty and you come across a book, you come across a bag, the significance is you find unexpectedly. Okay, but here they say maybe in America to run across is to meet. So here's the example. I ran across some old photos while I was cleaning my house. So that's no problem. It's maybe understandable. The significance is you've found. But for me, in so if you have an accident with the car maybe hits the animal or the car kills the dog. We say the car run the dog over or the car run the dog down. So to run down or to run over is maybe to kill in relation to an accident, a car accident. Okay. The second significance with the noun, if the person is very run down, that's very, very typical, but the significance is different. The person is very run down. That means you are working, you are working, you are working, you constantly work, no break, no holiday, no day off. You continuously work, and eventually your health is very, very bad. So you feel run down. So you lose your energy, you feel very tired, you feel exhausted. So it's very typical. The person is very run down, and the significance is very unhealthy or tired or sick. Okay, and because of energy, because of work. So that is very, very typical. That run down. And here we can see we have another preposition to run away, which is situation, if the person has a romantic relationship with somebody and they want to escape everybody, they run away with each other. So that's possible as well. So we have a lot with the verb to run. And just let me check here. Run down, run away from. Run against is possible in one context, and against is contra. So it's typical in politics. If you have one candidate and another candidate, this candidate runs, so you run for office. Okay, in politics we say to run for office, and that means you want to be the politician, you want to be the elected person. So to run for office means you're a candidate and you can run against the other person. Okay, so that's simple as well. So here we've run across, run against, run away from, run down, which is maybe to hit like the animal, but maybe a metaphor to criticize, and to be very tired, run for. Okay, they're the most typical, and you can see the examples. My dog was run down by a bus. So we have the verb to be, and we have the participle of run. So this is an example of passive. So the active is the bus run the dog down, and to change the position, the dog was run down by the bus. So that's an example of the active and the passive. My is very important. So everybody understands the weather is very, very windy. You have a lot of wind, but there is a verb in English to wind, which is completely different, and it's related to the watch. So this is my watch, and I have the little piece, and I need to wind. Okay, to move, to wind. That's the verb to wind. You have a machine, and you need to wind the machine. But in English, we have an extremely famous expression to wind up a person, and the significance is to annoy, to frustrate, to joke with somebody. So if you wind me up, you make me very angry, you make me laugh, you make me frustrated. It's like the machine, because when you have the robot and you wind the robot, and eventually the robot moves and jumps. So to wind up a person, the significance is to joke and to play a trick with somebody. Okay, that's very, very typical. And then they are the most typical with run. Oh, we have more. Okay, so run into. Yes, this is very typical. So to run into is like to find the person. I'm going to no. So this is very typical on the street. You are walking on the street, you are shopping, and you meet unexpectedly your friend. So you run into your friend. So it's almost like hit or impact, but it's a metaphor that you just meet unexpectedly. Off as well. So if you run off, it's the significance to escape. So it's exactly the same as run away. A little different. Run away is more from home. So this is your home and you run away, like emigrate to a different home. But run off is maybe just one little location on the street. So if you are on the street and there is an accident, there is an incident, and a few people run off, that means escape, but in the context of maybe the accident or the incident. But run away maybe is more associated with your home. Okay. And the other example with run off is to reproduce. Here you can see to reproduce. So I have a book, I have a document, and I want to copy the document. I want to reproduce the document. So I run off a few copies. And the significance is to make I met unexpectedly. She's so nice. The second one, the new government is trying to run the drug traffickers off. Not really typical, but it's logical to make them move, to go away. And here, the third example, would you mind, is it okay running off 10 copies of this document? So is it okay, are you happy to make 10 copies of this document to run off? That's typical, it's possible. Why did you run off after the party? Again, that's very, very typical. So why did you leave? Again, run away is maybe different. If you're ignoring the problem, if you're escaping the problem, you're running away. But run off is just fast movement because maybe you want to go home. So there's a little difference. And finally, with water, it's possible to run off of water. Okay, and that means you have this quantity of water. You need this quantity of water, and the runoff is the excess. Okay, the excess water is the runoff that is not required. So that is typical as well. And here's the example. You should, where the sewage runs off into the sea. So should is for advice and recommendation. It's the negative. So I recommend, I advise you. Where the sewage, so this is difficult vocabulary. And let me get the translation for you here. Sewage in other languages. So you can see here, Bulgarian, Chinese, Croatian, Czech, Dutch, French. It's like wastewater. Hindu, Hebrew, Hungarian, Italian, Japanese, okay, Portuguese, Spanish, residual water, which is very similar. Okay, the waste. So you should not swim where the sewage runs off into the ocean. So the excess residual water runs off. So it's very, very flexible. It's related to movement again in water because you run the bath. Okay. And the last one, we ran out of milk. So it's irregular. Run, ran. We ran out of milk this morning. We lost. We have no more. So we need to go to the store. Okay, really good. So that's just an explanation of the phrasal verbs beginning with R. Very, very difficult. Very, very important. Very, very common. So I'm very, very happy because the quantity and the quality of the vocabulary is very, very good. And I think that's sufficient for the phrasal verbs for today. Okay, so just to review, the vocabulary is here. I will put the vocabulary in the comment section of the Facebook page below the video, and you can see everything. And I'll just finish with a few little idioms. So number one, we did phrasal verbs, but there's a few more idioms here. So the last time we stopped with that word to the person affected, and you ask for the story from the direct person. So that's the expression straight, directly from the mouth of the horse is the metaphor from the most important person that's related to the story. So that's very, very typical. The next one is typical as well. A warp is maybe very specific vocabulary. It's like a spiral. A warp is like very, very specific vocabulary. But a time warp is when you transport in time, or maybe you travel in time. So the expression stuck means you cannot move. So you're in the same position at the same time. But of course, the time moves. So if you are stuck in time, or you are stuck in a time warp, that's a metaphor or a joke that you're maybe very old fashioned, or you have not changed with the time, because everything changes, but you stay with the same fashion, you stay with the same opinions. So you're stuck in the time warp. It's a metaphor to say that you're maybe very old fashioned, or you have not changed your ways, but maybe it's a little insult and it's possibly a little negative. Okay, the next one is very, very famous as well. The verb is to swallow, which I think I'll just get the translations for other languages here. Well, it's typical for drink. When you take some drink and you swallow, tragar, I think, that action to swallow is the verb. And pride is very important as well. So pride is the noun and the adjective is proud. Okay, so you are very proud, but you have pride. So it's very important, the difference between the noun and the adjective. And there is a famous expression to swallow your pride. So because you're very proud, you do not want to do the activity, you do not want this job because you are very proud, but it's necessary. You have no choice. You need to swallow your pride and continue with the job. So that's very famous, and I think in other languages it's probably the same. There is another expression, we say pride comes before the fall. Okay, so the people who are very proud usually have a problem later because reality maybe affects and there's lots of disappointment. So there's a famous expression, your pride comes before the fall. And again, I think that's very you have to remember that one tooth is singular and two teeth, so it's plural and it's irregular. One tooth and two teeth. You can also say a toothache, which is a pain. An ache, remember, is a pain. You have a headache, a toothache, a backache. So a toothache is fine, but the expression a sweet tooth, if you have a sweet tooth, the significance is goloso, I think in Espanol. You like chocolate, you love sugar, you really enjoy the chocolate, so you have a sweet tooth. Okay, so that's very famous and I think very understandable. I think very common in other languages as well. So in English, if you have a sweet tooth, the significance is you like chocolate a lot, you like the sweets, and you like sugar. Okay. And focused really on the use of English primarily, but of course the other parts, the tenses and the grammar is important. But my classes probably focus a lot on the use of English, which are phrasal verbs and idioms, because I think they are so important and they're a big part of normal conversation with family, with friends, in movies, in series. They're really, really important. And that's the idea for the classes, to continue with this category of use of Englishes. Okay, today at 4 o'clock we have a specific webinar. So at 4 o'clock on Zoom, there is a specific webinar dedicated to the IELTS exams. And the IELTS exam is maybe reading, writing, speaking, and grammar. And you are welcome to attend. If you want to join the webinar, you can contact me and I will send link details for the morning. You're welcome to join as well. And that's the schedule and the timetable for this week. Okay. Remember, everything is free. So this class at the moment is free. It's a good opportunity for me to reconstruct work and to rebuild after the difficult year. And I'm very happy because it's the opportunity for me to grow online. It's the opportunity to meet new people and to contact and to reach new people with my teaching. So for me, it's very, very good. For you, I think it's a good opportunity as well. With the technology, with the internet, you can study from home, you can access the classes from home. And the idea is to give this free class for people who maybe cannot afford the school or cannot afford the teacher. And I'm very happy to do that. It's good for everybody. And if you want to leave a little tip at the end, if you're happy and you want to leave a little donation, there are 2 or 3 possibilities. Maybe with €1, if you want to say thank you, there is the bank transfer directly, and you have the code here for the IBAN and the BIC, and it should be very straightforward. It should be very easy. And the second possibility is with the application Revolut, which is very popular in Ireland and other countries as well. You just need the contact number and a small transfer with Revolut. Or finally, The third application is maybe Bizum. A good day. Finally, if you want to connect on social media, the link for Instagram, the link for Twitter, and the link for YouTube if you want. Okay, so thank you so much. Have a very good day, and hopefully I will see you maybe this afternoon in the IELTS webinar. If not, hopefully I see you during the week in the other classes. So thank you so much. Have a good day and talk to you soon. Bye bye.